Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our online teaching academy, Ekalaiva. Cbse Class 12 Economics. Chapter Economic Reforms since 1991, Liberalization, Privatization and Globalization. This chapter covers the meaning of economic reforms, need for new economic policy, elements of new economic policy, and an appraisal of LPG policies. Meaning of economic reforms. Economic reforms are the set of policies, rules, and regulations adopted for the growth and development of an economy. The set of policies refer to the policies that would direct the economy to accelerate the pace of growth and development. In 1991, India initiated the economic reform to come out of the economic crisis of 1980s. There were different reasons that led to the economic reforms in 1991. During the period 1990 to 91, India's foreign exchange reserves fell very low, that India was not able to pay for its imports. The imports were rising and the exports were falling, and that led to the decrease in foreign exchange reserves. Rising fiscal deficit was also another reason for the need for economic reforms. The expenditure of the government exceeded its revenue. Hence, government had to resort to borrowing. There was inflationary pressure in the economy. Due to poor financial health in the economy, the prices of essential goods increased. Crores of rupees were invested in the growth and development of public sector undertakings. But due to the poor performance of public sector, government had to face huge losses. Crores of rupees were invested in the growth and development of public sector undertakings during 1980s. But due to the poor performance of the public sector, government had to face huge losses. The balance of payment crisis was to the extent of 10,000 crores. There was unfavorable balance of payment. The total payments exceeded the total receipts of India on account of its transactions with the rest of the world. All these factors led to the economic reforms or the new economic policy 1991. Let us know the terms and conditions of the World Bank and IMF. Due to the economic crisis, India did not have adequate foreign exchange to pay even the interest for the finance borrowed from international lenders. Moreover, no country or international funders were willing to lend to India. Hence, India approached the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. At this situation, these international agencies laid the following terms and conditions. The international agencies expected India to liberalize and open up the economy. They wanted India to reduce the role of government and shift enterprises to the hands of private sector. They also wanted to remove trade restrictions between India and other countries. India agreed to this and announced the new economic policy in 1991. The policies aimed at competitive environment in the economy and removal of barriers for free entry of firms. These policies were classified into stabilization measures and structural measures. The stabilization measures are short-term measures intended to correct the weaknesses that have developed in the BOP, the balance of payment. And they aim at bringing inflation under control. Hence, when there is a price rise, these measures would help to control the increase in prices. Whereas structural reform measures are the long-term measures. They aim at improving the efficiency of the economy and increasing its international competitiveness. Let us now see the elements of new economic policy. The main elements of new economic policy are liberalization, privatization, and globalization, and these policies are termed as LPG. Liberalization is the removal of unnecessary trade restrictions and making the economy more competitive. New economic policy liberated private sector from rigorous controls and licensing. Before the implementation of new economic policy, there were lots of restrictions on trade, like the quantitative restrictions and high tariffs. But after the implementation of new economic policy and through the element of liberalization, these restrictions were removed. The main objectives of liberalization is to increase competition among domestic industries, to increase foreign capital formation and technology, to decrease the debt trap of the country, to encourage export and import of goods and services. Through liberalization policies, there were foreign exchange reforms, trade reforms, financial reforms, industrial reforms, and tax reforms. Let us now see the reforms in foreign exchange. The government devalued Indian rupee. To resolve the BOP crisis, the rupee was devalued against foreign currencies. Devaluation is the decrease in the value of domestic currency in terms of foreign currency, and this would in turn make exports cheaper, and this brings in inflow of foreign exchange. There was shift of exchange rate from fixed exchange regime to flexible exchange rate regime. In fixed exchange rate regime, the government fixes the exchange rate, whereas the flexible exchange rate regime, the rate is fixed by the market forces of demand and supply of foreign exchange. Hence, the foreign exchange reforms aimed at bringing in more foreign currency to India. Let us now see the reforms that had taken place in foreign trade. Restrictions on imports were removed. There was abolition of import licensing. Quantitative restrictions were removed and tariff rates were reduced. Export duties were also removed. Such liberalization of trade was to increase international competitiveness. Apart from this, such reforms increased the efficiency of domestic industries and there was technological advancement. Removal of export duties made exports cheaper. Financial sector reforms include commercial banks, investment banks, stock exchange, and other foreign exchange markets. Financial sector reforms aimed at reducing the role of RBI from the regulator to facilitator of financial sector. Due to the reforms, financial sectors were permitted to take decisions on certain issues without even consulting the Reserve Bank of India. They had freedom to set up new branches even without the approval of RBI. Both SLR and CRR are gradually being reduced. SLR is the statutory liquidity ratio, and CRR is the cash reserve ratio. SLR is the minimum percentage of deposits with the commercial banks which they are legally required to keep in the form of liquid assets as reserves with themselves, whereas CRR refers to the percentage of deposits with the commercial banks which these banks are legally required to keep as reserves with the central bank. Now, both the rates were gradually reduced. The repo rate is also gradually being reduced and adjusted. Repo rate is the interest rate at which the commercial banks can borrow from the central bank to meet their short term needs. Due to the reforms, there was reduction in the role of RBI. The reform aimed at reducing the role of RBI from regulator to facilitator. Establishment of private sector banks, including foreign banks. Many private sector banks were established due to the financial sector reforms. Let us now know the reforms in taxation. The tax rates are gradually being reduced. When the tax rates are high, taxpayers resort to tax evasion. Hence, as a part of new economic policy, tax rates were being reduced. Corporate tax rate was also reduced, and tax procedures were made simple. All nationalized banks accepted payment of taxes from then on. In 2016, a landmark step was taken by passing the GST, the Goods and Service Tax Bill. The law came into effect in July 2017. It is a single tax system uniform throughout India. This tax replaced multiple tax system to virtually a single tax system. It has established a common national market for goods and services. It is also expected to generate more revenue. The rates of taxes before 1991 were very high. GST ensures smooth flow of products from one part of the country to another. Reforms in industrial sector. Industrial licensing was abolished. Many industries were delicensed. They were freed from license. Before the implementation of new economic policy, an entrepreneur had to get permission to start a company or to close it, or he has to decide on the production, or even when he has to produce goods, the quantity has to be decided by the government. But after the implementation of new economic policy, all such rules and regulations were removed. The industries reserved for public sector have been de-reserved. Now, private sector was also permitted in setting up of many industries. Certain departments like railways, defense equipments, atomic energy generation are reserved only for public sector. Many goods produced by small scale industries were also de-reserved. So such reservation and restrictions were removed and the prices were determined based on the demand and supply of goods. To receive our online lessons, please press the subscribe button and you will receive the latest updates. Thank you.